this is kind of recent news, and we touched on it a little bit here on Friday over at the Dog and Chicken Show, but it
Ooh.
does bear repeating because this is a big one. Nebraska does have something else to brag about. Nebraska legislature passes permitless concealed carry bill.
Let's get into this local Nebraska story. Gentlemen, we are now a constitutional carry state.
Oh, yep.
Hear, hear.
Yeah, I mean, we finally got there. We're number 26. We got there. We crossed the finish line. And it's Governor Jim Pillen's going to sign it on Tuesday. It's going to go into effect sometime around September 10th. It'll probably be September 10th. But even in Omaha, there's 150 concealed weapons cases, and the prosecutor said they're ultimately going to have to just drop those cases. So
Jim Pillen just did himself a lot of favors in terms of gaining support for hanging on to this position for a while. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Like, didn't expect it to go through. Honestly, I really didn't. I thought this was going to be one of those things they dance around for a long time, but they pushed through. I'm a little flabbergasted, and I mean, people are going to save $100 instead of having to re-sign up for a concealed carry permit. We're good to go.
We now have, no matter how you want to boil it down, no matter how you want to look at it with any technicality, a majority of states are now constitutional carry, and that applies to knives too. Turns out,
really,
yes, on the bang, and so yeah, any length of knife now is also legal to carry. Trust me, Tony, I was doing some extra research into that, and yes, turns out concealed weapons. There's a few select spots where you're not allowed to carry, which, it's like schools, courthouses, and a few government buildings. Other than that, it's pretty well the Second Amendment means the Second Amendment, and big, heavy preemption laws that don't allow Omaha or Lincoln to make laws more stringent than state laws. So, like anybody like you, me, anybody that's legally allowed to carry a gun or own a gun can carry them about Omaha or Lincoln now, if they wish.
So what's the transition on this? Not just on the body, but carrying it like in your vehicle, because and not just the guns, on the knives as well. Because back in high school, when I was like a junior or a senior, I got pulled over, searched illegally. They found a knife that I had shoved behind a seat, behind an armrest. Eventually, the case got dropped, but because obviously he didn't ask for permission to search my car when he found the knife. That was sheathed. That was put away. That was way the hell out of my range, but I digress. So in terms of the vehicle, what does this mean?
As far as I've read, like, it also preempts the Omaha law about not being able to have a gun in your vehicle without a permit. And so you will be allowed to carry on your person and in your vehicle.
Okay.
Now, so that's big news for Nebraska.
That's fantastic.
I mean,
hey guys, welcome to Free America with concealed carry. Cheers.
I know we're in constitutional carry now. We finally got there. I
didn't think Nebraska would do it this early. I thought it was going to be a few years.
Well, they weren't going to give anybody weed, so they figured better just give them this.
Give them guns at least.
I've been kind of joking. It's like, if they do like legal recreational weed and constitutional carry, I don't know if I'm ever going to leave this state all that much. Chicken, we are new to the constitutional carry game because, like, guys, Nebraska has actually been shockingly behind the curve for all carry rights in this country.
Nebraska's been pretty like lefty. Shit.
Yeah. So, like, Chicken, your state has had constitutional carry for how long now?
Since the beginning of COVID.
Okay. Now, Chicken, you've had constitutional carry. Now I have to ask you, because people always say that poverty leads to crime. South Dakota has two of the poorest counties in the United States.
True.
Actually. Has the streets run red with the blood of the innocent?
No. Actually, let me ask ChatGPT.
Okay.
Remember when people thought, it was like giving people open carry was just going to turn it into the wild, wild west, and giving states legal weed and turn it into just California and the homeless populations. And like, I'm not seeing that problem with every state, because here's the thing, maybe it's not an issue overall. Maybe it's a state by state problem. Maybe when a state has a problem, giving a state freedom just kind of amplifies that fucking problem. And maybe when a state can handle that issue,
Four horsemen,
because the morals of the state are just higher than other states.
ChatGPT does not have anything newer than like 2020
Oh wow.
Okay.
It's not allowed to look
baby.
It's not allowed. It's not allowed to look at anything in the last, like, I think they set it up for 3 years. It's not to look at 3 years worth of data.
Ben says Omaha and Lincoln have been dragging their feet. And Grow the Farm Up says just tuned in back to the OG3, and
yes, sir.
We got Justin here, so we got the Four Horsemen. Woo!
Oh, and Grow the Farm Up. If you want to get in on that giving Phil gin shots thing, but you're just dead set against Facebook, already taking advantage tonight by Bandit on YouTube. Buymeacoffee.com/TonyG.
OG3 and JC.
Phil drink gin, or I'll chug a beer. I'm just I'm just throwing it out.
No, Grow the Farm Up doesn't need to do this.
But
so need to make you take shots of gin.
So like constitutional carry. So when Iowa passed it, I was living there.
Yes.
And I was living in South Dakota when it passed. One thing, South Dakota, when it passed in 2019, most people didn't even know. Like it wasn't highly publicized. Same thing. So in Iowa, if you guys remember the conversations we had when I was living there, I had a very, very liberal neighbor across the street, like very woke, super woke. And she would come over and me and her would argue in my garage until 3 a.m, like yelling at each other about fucking woke shit. And it was super fun. I loved it because like my son would like be like, Dad, you fucking crushed her. I'd be like, dude, what? He's like, I would listen. He's like, I listened to the whole thing. I was standing in the kitchen, listening through the door. You crushed her. But anyway.
And how much pride did you feel in that moment?
A lot.
Like a scale of 1 to 10.
Dad, I got you. Like that, Dad, I got you.
50 is what I felt.
I recorded it for you, Dad.
But she didn't even know constitutional carry had passed. And it had already been passed for like 6 months. And she goes, oh my God, I can't believe, because she saw me like whenever I'd go camping. Like there's times like in Iowa, my neighborhood was super safe. I wasn't super worried. Right. Like sometimes I carried my gun, sometimes I didn't. Judge me all you want, fucking you super goddamn weird gun-toting fucks. Like if I feel it necessary, if I'm going to a place to where I'm like, shit, I should probably bring my gun, I do. If I go, oh, I'm just going to the grocery store, I don't, because like it was an itty bitty town. It's a small town. Like it's not going to happen. Until it happens, I get it.
Is a lot worse than going to the grocery store.
Yeah. But I get it. That's the time that it happens when you don't have your gun. I understand it. Anyway, put all that fucking criticism aside before you put that in the chat, you fucking assholes. She had no idea that it had already passed, and she saw me get out of my truck. And I pulled my fucking pistol out right away as I'm walking into the door. Is that's what I would do. Is I would unload it before I walked into the house, and then I would set it down into a drawer because like I didn't want my wife and kid to see me like unloading my gun. Like my wife's not uncomfortable with guns, but like I just, my kid was only 12. Like it was one of those things, like I didn't want him asking those questions right away. Like he's only 12, like whatever, we'll figure that shit out later. And then I would put my gun away, and she saw me, my neighbor saw me get out of my truck and unload my gun as I'm walking into the house. And then when she came over, she goes, I saw you. Like, do you have a concealed carry permit? I go, no. Well, what are you doing with that gun? I saw you have a holster and it was concealed. I was like, no, it's totally legal. And I had to show her, and she fucking about lost her fucking mind that was a thing. And I go, honey, this has been a thing for 6 months. People aren't out there shooting each other. In fact, it's the exact opposite. Like nobody's shooting each other right now because you don't know who has a gun anymore.
Yeah.
And I can have a fucking pistol at the ready, loaded, ready to rock and roll. And I can take you down. And so, criminals pay attention to those laws. Some do.
Weird.
Not all.
Weird how gun laws don't stop criminals, but the potential for other people having weaponry, not just the asshole who's going to abuse that power, kind of deters them from doing something bad. Huh.
Armed society can be a polite society. Now,
that's what you have here in the actual Midwest is a polite society.
The real Midwest, not Indiana.
Yeah. Now, I was looking through, and when I found the one exception to the constitutional carry of the 27, technically North Dakota has permitless carry, but for residents only. If you're not from North Dakota, you still have to go through a couple, like basically if you have like a Utah carry permit, it's good in North Dakota, and I believe. Double check me on that, but it's one of those.
The crossing state lines bullshit,
close, but not quite.
So we're over halfway there.
So in North Dakota can still do the but he crossed state lines. North Dakota is way more liberal than I thought. When I first moved to South Dakota, I was like, oh, South Dakota, North Dakota, like, oh yeah. Like I bet they're both pretty goddamn like conservative and just
they're
pretty
different.
free. No, North Dakota is liberal as fuck.
Yeah, it's weird.
It is weird. Super weird.
It is weird how different those two states are.
It's partially because
they blend together.
Yeah, it's like Grand Forks and Fargo are on the Minnesota border, which is where a lot of people live, and the entire state, so they get to write the laws for the entire state.
Nebraska's got a lot to offer, and you know what? Matter of fact, this is kind of recent news, and we touched on it a little bit here on Friday over at the Dog and Chicken Show, but it does bear repeating because this is a big one. Nebraska does have something else to brag about. Nebraska legislature passes permitless concealed carry bill. This is pretty big.
Constitutional carry. Basically, if you're legal, 20, 26 or 27, depending on how you want to look at it, because North Dakota has constitutional carry for its residents, but if you're from out of state, you need a concealed carry permit. So they're like 90% of the way there, but so some consider 26, some consider 27, but we are now officially, no matter how you want to boil it, in a total majority of states are in constitutional carry. Now, your state just recently changed its carry laws. I don't know if you're full on constitutional carry in Texas yet, Osiris, but I'll look up the constitutional carry map here and say, but what is your thoughts in general over a majority of our states now not needing a permit to carry a concealed or otherwise weapon?
I would say I would lean on that's a good part because I don't feel like the people who, if you look at the statistics of who legally owns guns, I don't feel like those people who are legally owning guns are usually the ones who are doing crimes out in public.
Agreed.
So whatever, I don't think that this changes much, except for that now there's less hoops to jump through for the people who are legally buying guns. Right. The biggest thing for me about guns is how do you get the guns out of hands of criminals? And typically these criminals are people who were criminals before they had the guns, which that's the real problem in the United States. I could care less about gun laws in the regard of maybe we should make them easier but more effective. I think that we should know who has guns in the United States. We should know that, and that's it. If you buy one, just let Uncle Sam know, and that's it.
Now this is something I think you and I are going to have a little bit of a disagreement on here, Osiris. Is one of the points of our revolution and one of the sticking points of our revolution. One of the reasons we have a Second Amendment is it is yours, mine, or anybody else's right, and it's nobody else's business but our own. If you happen to own guns, how many, what kind, or even where they are, it's nobody else's business but your own. And that's kind of the point, is the government doesn't get to or have to know where all the guns are, and that is what makes the security of a free state so possible with our glorious Second Amendment. So to me, this constitutional carry is just us finally, because like to me, I always found it kind of grating that when you have to get a permit to carry a weapon, that's sort of you going to, oh, please, master, please return to me just a little bit of what you've stolen from me. And so we're finally respecting the Second Amendment in my state. So that's what I enjoy.
The big thing I think important about this is like a state like Nebraska with a low population and, let's be frank, a lot of gun owners out there. This opens the door not just for people to save $100 a year, to not have to renew a permit for $100, but the people that were carrying already without a permit, and there's a lot of them, I guarantee you. All this does is prevent them from breaking a law. So that's why this is a great thing. Because before, you had people who did not have a concealed carry permit carrying anyway. This prevents punishing someone for doing something that really should not have been punishable in the first place. So I think that's the big important thing to think about here. In a state like Nebraska, it makes sense. Now, you get into a higher, more sparsely, densely populated shit show like California, say, maybe it's not such a great idea. I don't know, maybe mental health, maybe because wackadoos. I'm not going to, disparage the great people of California by any means. I'm just saying that we're better.
I mean, obviously Nebraska is a better state.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll give you that.
I would say to you, Phil, about what you just said, that I'm sympathetic to that argument. Definitely. And in a perfect world, that's how it would be. But you're gonna have to do it. But I think there's background checks you can't get rid of. You have to know the person who's buying the gun. And once the government does that, they're automatically cataloging you anyways. Let's be frank.
Well, I mean, in a lot of states, private sales are totally legal. Not to be considered sexual legal advice, but in a lot of states, you can actually sell a gun completely private, just on a handshake, and that's it. And so, whether we like it or not,
which doesn't make sense, by the way,
there's 400 million guns in circulation in this country already. And we know probably where about 250 million are, roughly, kind of a fuzzy idea where they are. The rest of them are just in old Aunt Nellie's closet, and are in your underneath the seat of your old Uncle Unky Fratz's pickup truck, and they're just fucking everywhere. And like I've said, if you wanted to make it as draconian as you could possibly imagine, the punishment is immediate execution upon being found with a gun. Still take at least 150 years to purge guns from American life. So it's like when people talk about gun bans or even registration, to me, that's not real. You're not being realistic at that point. Like it's a pie in the sky solution of we're going to register the guns. We got to.
I think we had this conversation. Maybe with somebody else, but this goes to the conversation I had before when we were talking. Yeah, you did tell me that before, and I think basically my response to that is, yeah, you're 100% right on that. But more to the point is, most of the people who are talking about gun control, overwhelming majority, are people who come from cities. The cities of the United States and the rural areas and the suburbs of the United States have a totally different gun problem. Yeah. I wouldn't even say a gun problem, gun situation, and
mentality.
Yeah. And I think that we should deal with cities in very different ways than we deal with rural areas. There's no reason why most of the states like Georgia, Alabama, Louisiana, the Carolinas, Tennessee, like most of these states are one city states or two city states, like meaning that the entire state's ruled but this one place. Mm-hmm. And so instead of having things that cover a blanket part of the United States, why don't we look at the microcosms of the United States and where it matters? Like, let's say Atlanta. What's the city? Memphis, Atlanta,
Tennessee,
Miami. All these places where you got high concentrations of poverty and crime, and deal with that in a very different way than Jimmy Joe Bob that lives 300 miles from any civilization and doesn't give a fuck about none of that shit. Why would we need to punish him for what's going on in the city that he'd never even been to before?
Exactly.
Now, it's kind of a fascinating juxtaposition you talk about there, because hopefully he comes on a little later. I sent him an invite. He's getting stuff straightened out at home. But Lethe Waterkai, we had a in-depth discussion about this, and it was like a penny kind of dropped in my mind about the big difference, because he explained, for you, Phil, in the rural areas, like it sounds like to some extent, it's like guns are kind of like a form of male jewelry. Like this was my grandpappy's shotgun, and it was passed down to my dad and then to me. And it's like, and this has a lot of sentimental meaning to me, and this is what I use it for, to go goose hunting or whatever. Meanwhile, in the city, he talked about anytime he saw a gun, usually he lost a friend over it. And so it's a very different mentality as to the minute you even see a gun. And so that's a urban rural divide that, like, the gun issue so perfectly crystallizes and encapsulates the urban rural divide in our politics and in our living in this country. Like, I don't think if you wanted to point to one issue, gun issue, there you go. That most perfectly just encapsulates what is our issue.
That really is at the top of the pyramid of what differentiates rural and urban. It's not even I grow the farm up. Urban and rural are basically two different countries. I take your point on. And that's well put, because you can't even dictate it by geography because it's so mixed and matched. It's a grab bag. That's what this country is, and that's what makes the country great, is so many different cultures mixed into one. And that's the original concept of the United States. Every state is essentially its own country, but we do all share a lot of the same tendencies. It's just very, very different culture-wise, and even amongst those states, city to city, town to town, it doesn't even look like the same thing. So you're right. How do you punish or dictate to someone living in the country who's 20 minutes away from real society versus people who it takes an hour to drive 10 blocks to their job every day because of the population? So it's not the same thing. You can't dictate the same rules, yet you have to. That is probably one of the biggest challenges and the reason we have such a divide in this country, because the day-to-day living situation and experience varies so differently. Town to town, state to state, coast to coast. It's not even the same thing once you go 24 hours in either direction, just on a drive. You will see greatly disparaging differences state to state, town to town. So it is a very questionable thing to make everybody follow the same set of rules, yet at the same time you have to.
Now, I'm kind of curious. Now, Osiris, I don't know if you followed the same spicy meme circles that I did back after the 2016 election, but I remember sharing this with a bunch of people and being like kind of a snotty little shit about it because it was a fun time. It was a glorious time in the memery. But there was these two maps, and one said Trump land, and it was all of America but a few little dots, and it was all red, glorious red state America. And then the next map was the Clinton archipelago, and it's all these little blue dots kind of sprinkled throughout the entire country and a little bit in California, and it was all the counties that voted blue. And it is if you were to just look at it just from that, it looks like this tiny little string of islands, and that's literally like the Clinton Biden archipelago wants to govern themselves in one way, and red state America, God's country, Trump land wants to govern themselves in another way. And the problem is the way they want to govern each other is starting to get further and further and further apart.
Well, if you want to see that in real time, just look up Earth at nighttime and look at the light dispersion. That's pretty much Dems versus or liberals versus conservatives.
Well,
people who can see the stars.
That's all CGI, man. No, we live on flat Earth. That's all fake movie production stuff. We've never been to space, man. Come on, you live under a dome.
Yeah. Now, Osiris, this is going to sound like kind of because, like, if I'm going to guess, you've usually lived in major metropolitan areas for at least a good majority of your life. Am I correct?
Yeah, or something. That
at least more than 5,000 people.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Here, like being from Nebraska, Tony and I, when we were in 4th grade, were educated that if you can find the Big Dipper, then that'll point you to the Little Dipper, and the handle of the Little Dipper literally points to the North Star. So from 4th grade, Tony and I have been able to navigate by the stars since we were little kids. And it's when I go to the big cities, I can't see the stars anymore. And that's something that just like really throws me off. And that's another one of the big urban rural divide. Like if you can see the stars, you're 90% more likely to vote Republican, I think.
That's probably true.